Welcome to the Predictable Revenue Podcast, where sales leaders teach you what's working for them so you can build it yourself. Feeling ready to kick your sales into high gear? We're here to help. Check out our sales coaching and consulting services at predictablerevenue.com. Welcome back to the Predictable Revenue Podcast. I'm your host, Colin Stewart. Today I'm joined by Jay Mount. He's the head of our consulting practice here at Predictable Revenue. And we're going to talk about 7 Apollo features you're probably not using. Jay, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Colin. Glad to be here.
Yeah, man. Happy to have you, always. I think this is a 3rd appearance on the show.
Second or third.
Yeah. Second or I thought we had one just before, either when you first joined PR. No?
Not that round, yeah. So I think it might be the second, actually.
Second, okay. Because we met, back when you were doing, we were a competitor product to Carb, and I'm drawing a blank on it. The name. Basics. I think you're in my phone as J Basics still, so I should know that. But yeah, that was like 6 years ago, 5 years ago, something like that. It's been a while.
6, 7 almost, yeah.
Yeah. So it's, if you're looking to, if you want to, I don't even remember what we talked about, but I think it was probably sales productivity, customizing emails, I think is my guess. So if you're curious, you want to go back in time and see Colin with a lot less skill and ability and a worse mic, you could go check that out. I wouldn't recommend it though. But welcome back to the show. Jay. One of the things I love about Apollo is like data and the engagement tool together. I guess I should comment to the audience. This isn't a Apollo sponsored whatever. We just happen to use Apollo, and we do a lot of consulting work around Apollo. And we find that anytime we dig into somebody's instance and they're saying, oh, Apollo isn't working, they're using it in a very basic way, or they're using it like a spam cannon. And they're just went, okay, let's grab all the data over here and let's shove it into one sequence and then just hit go with as many emails as possible. And while you can do that in Apollo, I don't think you should. And Jay and I were kind of ranting and rambling about, all the things that people don't know about Apollo. And we thought, hey, why don't we stop and we'll turn the mics on and just kind of record the conversation. And so we're going to talk about some of Jay's favorite things. I'll interject and waste some of your time as well. But Jay, what is the first thing that you wish people understood about Apollo that they typically miss?
I think it's so easy to go from finding contacts or accounts to sequence that we tend to just use the same filters over and over again. And when everyone's doing the same thing in this kind of work, it stops being as effective. And so with how easy they make it to do that, spending a little bit of extra time on some of the additional filters that are in the search panel really can make a huge difference. You'll go after a different list in a different order. You can personalize better. And so that's definitely something that I look at first, is how can I make this more nuanced as I sort of tweak the search beyond just titles, beyond just industry and the basic stuff.
Yeah, this is going to come off as ass kissing to Apollo, so I apologize. But I'm a fan of the tool. The thing that I really liked about it was the data and the sequencer together, and not just that they're in the same place and it's easy. It is great that I don't have to download, upload everything, but it's the integration of the two that I can stack I've got my entire possible database that I'd want to reach out to, and I can stack that with like triggers and workflows, and I can mix those two together. I think one of the underrated features of Apollo is that those just work together. Whereas if you want to use, as Outreach and a Zoom Info, they absolutely work together, but you have to make them work together in a central repository, or there's an integration step. And, when you're getting two tools to work together, from my experience, we had both of those two tools previously. You can, even with Salesforce, it just never works quite as well as Apollo. So that's enough kind of brown nosing on my part. I'll try and hold myself back. Again, not getting paid, just like the tool, and like not having to pay for Salesforce, like not having to pay for all these extra things. So I care about that. And some of the geeky complexity that we're going to get to later relates to these two things working together. And I think that's a piece that people miss, is that to be able to apply, sequence filters and ICP filters in the same kind of workflow is pretty interesting.
It opens up some pretty powerful combinations for sure.
Mm-hmm. Talk to me about how you use the search panel.
Yeah. So, I usually start company first and then person. Doesn't really matter what the order is, but that's just how my brain works, is working downwards like that.
I'm the same way. I can't do it another way unless I'm running a very specific play of like they have to have 7 right-handed sales development reps, and in which case I'll start with like the company or the contact first. But I'm 99% of the time company first.
Nice. Um, First thing I usually do when I'm doing that is look at, account location, industry, and potentially just looking at employee size. But there's some cool additional filters in there that let you differentiate because everyone's going for filters like that. And so inside industry, what I found a lot of value in is spending some time including and excluding keywords. So going in there, turning on the additional keywords in the include, so like social media descriptions and SEO, just gives you a little bit more data. And then I add a keyword, I look on the right to see how my results are changing. I scan them, I see a keyword I don't like in the list, I exclude that, and I go back and forth through a little bit. And it takes a little bit of time, but you can really dial in a list so much deeper than those industry filters with that play.
I love it. I'll even download the first 100 accounts and throw them into a CSV just because I've got a big monitor and I'd like to be able to see. And I do like Apollo, but the one thing I don't like about the one of the views is that you can't see all those all the keywords on one screen. Even if you stretch it out super wide, it just kind of only ever wants to show you like 8.5 of them. Damn it. So I will download it and then look at it and go, okay, these are the ones, sort it. Anyway, I love that.
You mentioned 7 left-handed SDRs. They did at some point slip in a little feature with job titles at the account level. So you can say, does this company have SDRs? Does this company have, variations of the SDR title, and grab those ones? So that opens up some interesting possibilities too.
Can you do the opposite? Can you do show me companies that don't have SDRs?
That is a good question. It's not usually the one I'm doing. Let me take a quick look.
Because those are two of my favorite, I should say favorite plays, but they're ones that, one of the cool things about a search like this is it lets you like almost build out the organizational chart. Like, hey, show me companies that have a VP of revenue or like sales or marketing, right? It shows a level of maturity, right? It shows a level of, okay, if I only sell to VPs, cool. I want to make sure that these companies are in there.
Yeah, definitely. I used to go to people first for that kind of play, download it to Excel or Sheets, do a dedupe, grab just the accounts, upload it back up. It looks like it is include only. That's what I thought a nice ad. But you could still do that download, upload, move in order to get yourself the ones who don't have that title.
Cool.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. Having the going into the search kind of panel, you've got your keywords. Did we talk about not this keyword? Like we'll use these ones and then we'll exclude different keywords.
Yeah.
I think that's an underrated move.
Definitely. That one gets you a lot of mileage because you're going to get a lot of includes that aren't going to be on point, and the exclude really lets you pull out the scalpel and, perform surgery on your list.
One thing that we were doing when we were sharing screens earlier, and you had the filters up. I think there's a couple boxes that you clicked. I think it was SEO and it was SEO description and something else that you enabled. Talk to me about what those are and what they add into the kind of keyword selection.
Yeah, so it looks like it pulls in some extra data for the keywords to work with. So they have a few places that they're pulling keywords in from. And so
social
really
media.
Social media and SEO. So instead of just getting data off of the other downstream data sources, I'm guessing, descriptions from databases that they've purchased, we're also pulling in their website's SEO description, which and some of the other social media tags or social media page descriptions that are out there. So LinkedIn page, stuff like that, looks like it's in there.
So generally, this is probably going to be very similar, but sometimes there's kind of niche things that you're looking for where you'll find them in the SEO tags or in the social media tags. And I think the way I think about it is like the general data is probably pulled from like their LinkedIn description. It might not be, but that's loosely what it's going to be. Somebody in marketing wrote this. When you look at the SEO tags, you'll find different tags because somebody in SEO wrote that, and somebody in social media wrote the other ones. And so if you're not finding the precise keyword, enabling those things can let you go a little bit farther. And I don't think I've seen I haven't tried the social media one. I think that was the new one. But I've used the SEO tags before, and I do find it adds just another layer of like granularity for you to go into.
Definitely gives you that search engine result snippet. So you can use that right inside Apollo, which is pretty nice.
Mm-hmm. What else? Anything else on the search, specifically on like the keywords on that search panel?
No, just, jumping on that podium again about spend some time there, like make it interactive, include,
Mm,
look at the list, find what's working, what's not, come back, do the exclude. It really is worth spending a little bit of extra time in that spot to get it right.
totally. Two things I wanted to add on. One, the way Apollo is built, you can just copy the link. So if you add in a bunch of like keywords and you don't want to lose that, you can just copy that link. So that you could come back to that page. So you go do an account search page or whatever with, X and Y applied. You just copy that link and you can come back to it. You can also save it. You can also save, I think you could save the company search filters as an ICP. And then, or is it just the persona that you can save?
Both. You can save a company version and then you can save a people search. So you can save both.
I love this so much because I'll have like my base when I'm working with the client. I'll be like, okay, here's the base ones that we want to include, exclude for everybody. And then I'll save that. And then I'll go do the fancy stuff where I'm like, okay, now from my TAM, I want to carve out this specific play, left-handed SDRs, and then I'll go and I'll add those filters. Obviously, left-handed SDRs is a very silly example. But I love the being able to save it and being able to just like build on a filter and be able to come back to it. And because I've spent 45 minutes putting a search together, and then like you could click back and you're like, shit. But fortunately, you could just click forward again and you get back to it. You don't lose all that work.
That's a good call out. Yeah. And the save feature, making those your templates. They're not just specific searches. Like I just label them templates so I can find them quickly. And you can go back and pull.
It's one thing I should probably be a little bit better at is like labeling things. I'm always like in the moment, I'm like, download list. Yeah, sure. What should I call this list? Do I add these folks to a list? I'll just call it, November 8th. That's when we're recording, or that's when I'm doing the work. And then I go back and I'm looking through my downloads a week later. I'm like, okay, I built 20 lists in the last week. The hell do I call it? Do you have like a naming convention that you use? Because I don't do a good job there.
Client name, rough description of what my target filter was, and that's where there's the most variation. And then the word template at the end if it's a template. And then if it's something I'm doing one off, I grew up putting the date at the beginning of my file name. So year, month, day. I do that when it's just like a one-off I want to be able to reference.
I envy people like you. I did not grow up with that happen. So yeah, that's a very good idea. If we're moving in from the saving your ICP and persona filters. And if we're moving too fast, Apollo has pretty good documentation. So just go do a quick search, and I'll link to their knowledge base in the show notes. And we'll try and call things out where we can. So just in case we're moving too fast and we're getting too geek speak on you. Talk to me about keywords management level, because this is I think a pretty obvious one, but it's easy to miss if you're not looking for it.
Yeah. So what I've been doing lately, instead of trying to put in every permutation and combination of a title, is especially like early on using certain distinct keywords and combining that with management level to bring in the management level. So what that gives me is some more flexibility to see what kinds of different title variations there are and see what it brings in. And so instead of going after like manager of marketing as the keywords, I would put marketing as the keyword only, and then I would pick manager level in the management level field, and that will show me all the different variations of marketing managers that are out there, giving me the ability to then pick and choose the ones I want and kind of dial in my search myself, rather than just me guessing what the titles are and then only seeing the stuff I've guessed. So I find that super powerful when I'm hunting for certain titles.
Nice. And the same applies from earlier. You can do include, exclude with the keywords here, right? So if you're going like marketing, you could specifically exclude anybody who's doing direct mail, like direct mail marketing manager, if you're going specifically after digital, or the inverse if you're going after direct mail marketing managers.
Yeah, exactly the same as company keywords, which is really powerful.
Yeah, that's super neat. Anything else on keyword management level?
There is functional data, which I sometimes try. My move there is like to see how it works. It's department level information. Sometimes that
Hmm,
helps, sometimes it doesn't. So it's not my starting point, but it is something you could take a look at if you're just inside a finance team or just inside a sales team, for example.
mm-hmm. I find if I'm new to an industry and I don't understand all the potential job titles and haven't done the research, I'll just kind of click on the functional area and management level, and I'll look at what all the different permutations are. It's not the best way to do it, but it is one of those like quick hacks. If you're there, you're like, oh, let's just see.
Definitely.
Love it. One thing that I didn't know was in Apollo was SIC codes. I grew up using SIC codes, NAICS codes. Um, how do you get SIC codes into Apollo?
Back up to the company level. So you can get the top level SIC codes in. They are available on the people search, but it is company level data that's being piped over.
Mm,
And that lets you get way more nuanced about the industry that the company's in. Um, you're going to see a bunch of weird random numbers coming up. So the move is just
mm.
have a Google window open on the side and Google for what the SIC codes are that you're looking for. And then you can plop those right into Apollo and get some pretty detailed targeting.
Cool. For anybody who didn't grow up with Apollo or Zoom info, SIC codes are how we used to have to build lists back in the olden days, and you had to go search through and find the most related kind of SIC code to your industry. And SIC codes, I think they come from the U.S. tax, like in accounting. It's when you file your taxes, you have to, select which industry you belong to. So they absolutely aren't perfect. They don't encompass everything. It is just another way of building a list. So if the specific industry filter in Apollo isn't giving you exactly what you want, this is another thing to try.
Yeah, it's going to break them down a little bit differently. It is an IRS field, to my knowledge, as well.
Mm,
And when you Google, you're going to see SIC codes or SIC codes. You're going to see NICS codes or NAICE codes, CS codes, sorry. And those things are comparable with each other. If you get a NICS code, ask Google what the SIC code is for it, and it will give it to you. And then you can put that SIC code into Apollo.
cool. And keep in mind, I think it's the 4-digit SIC code that you can put in. There's like an extended 7-digit. It's like the 4 plus a dash and then another 4. So I think it's maybe 8, something like that. But with Apollo, they only go down to 4, which is still pretty good. I would have been
Yeah.
surprised if they went down to 8. That's a very crazy level of specificity for a filter that's almost hidden because this isn't one that you'll see. Like if you're listening in and or listening back to this and you're looking in your Apollo, you have to go to, in the company account search filter, you have to go add more filters. Like it's the bottom left button that says like add more. And then you have to go specifically add this one in so that you can see it in the regular view. Am I right there? I'm not looking at it right now, but I think that's loosely what you got to do.
Yeah. There potentially the button is in one of two places depending on which UI you're on right now. And then it's either at the bottom or top, there's a more filters option. The cool thing that Apollo has now is you can also pin your favorite filters. So if you're finding ones you like, pin them, and then that will just pop up when you're hovering over the category, and then unpin the ones you're not using, and that saves you from having to open them more every time.
Oh, that's awesome. Because I found when I was building lists all the time, and like I'd always have to go more filters and then go here. And I had like my bunch that I would always add on, the 7 or 8. There's one that I could never find. I'm looking right at it, but I can't find it, can't see it. And so pinning, that would solve a lot of my problems.
Yeah. Everyone's got their own way they work. Some people like to look for it. Some people use search. There is a search bar too. So if you're just trying to go really fast, you can just start typing in the search bar and it will just pull the filter up for you.
Love it. We kind of talked about while we're on companies. Another, one way we talked about at the top is have sales development reps or has a marketing team. Is it a job function or is it a specific job title?
So there is two different ways to do it. You can do job titles specifically and go after job titles. You can also look for headcount inside a certain team. So there's headcount growth. and you can select a department for that. So you can look at headcount growth for sales. You can look at headcount growth for any other sort of functional department you're looking for as well.
That's fantastic. I love the headcount growth signal. Did they have just raw headcount, or is it strictly growth?
There's both. I was just looking for the right keyword. So there's headcount growth for growth, and then there is number sign employees by department, which is the other one
Right.
where you can dial in mins and maxes for specific functional areas.
Love that. I spent so much time going to LinkedIn Sales Nav just to get that headcount growth filter and then scraping it or exporting it. Back in the day when you had to do it manually in Clay and going through and click, 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 click. Man, that was spent probably weeks doing that, like linear time weeks. It was, yeah, I didn't enjoy that. So I'm glad that that's a filter that exists now. Because it is, yeah, it is a great ability to target. If you're looking at, yeah, I mean, when we're looking at companies, and say we're looking at the consulting side of things, looking for companies that are growing with that department, like, oh, you've added, 8 more SDRs. That's an indication that there's potentially growing pains here, right? This filter in and of itself doesn't mean they're a great customer. But when you stack on 5 or 6 things that make them 5% more likely, well, now you're starting to get into 30%, 40% more likely. So 25% or 30% more likely if I want to do the correct math here. But this is a sales business podcast. Don't check my math. How dare you? So I like that. I like the ability to do the searches and the account or the job title growth. That's really handy that it's in Apollo now.
Definitely. Lets you do some neat things too. Like sometimes people use the co-founder title and you can search for that. Sometimes they don't. So founder is actually one of the departments that Apollo has ready for you. So you can say min 2 founders in the founder department and then find all those companies with co-founders. So there's lots of little small things in there if you spend a little bit of time thinking about how to put in the filters.
Can you give me another example of how you've used that in the past?
Mostly I've used it for the co-leadership roles, to be honest. So looking for 2 in a title that, often would have only 1.
Hmm.
But also it's helpful for getting sales team sizes, for instance, or marketing team sizes. So has at least these many people in the sales team, or has a max of 2 in the sales team, is definitely helpful. I've also used Zero for sales leadership. So looking for businesses that don't have a sales leader in place yet. And that's a helpful one.
Yeah, I used to use that one. I would do this manually in LinkedIn, as I would do that search and then scrape it, and I would do no sales leadership, active founder, and a couple AEs or like an AE and an SDR, like min 1 SDR, min 1 AE, max like 2 or 3 of each, and then that kind of helped isolate like solo founders or founders that were still in the sales management role.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Mac
cool.
one
That's great.
founder in the founder team plus, 0 people in the sales team. And there you have something equivalent to what you were doing.
Totally. Oh man, so much easier that it's all baked into Apollo. And I genuinely didn't know you could do that until 30 seconds ago. So that's great.
I feel like they've
One
been
of the
sneaking features in continuously. Every time I go in there, I find something I didn't know about.
Totally. Yeah, I can definitely, I suspect normal people aren't this way, but it is Apollo. I find is one of those tools that I could blink and like 4 hours went by. And I just spent way too much time designing this one little niche thing that's probably not gonna generate like enough value to justify the 4 hours I just spent. But I did a cool thing, and I'm gonna tell my wife about it, and she's gonna go, I don't care. She won't say the second part out loud, but she'll go, oh wow, that's nice. And I'm like, I know you don't care, but I just had to tell somebody because I did a cool thing, you know?
Next. You heard the inside voice as well, like it was
Oh
outside.
yeah. Oh, I mean, we've been married a while. I know. I even as I'm saying it, I'm like, nobody should care about what I'm about to say, but I still got to say it anyway.
Yeah.
Everybody listening on the podcast is going, yeah, just move on. Talk to me about activity filters.
Yeah. So using those a lot more lately to make changes to campaigns or to set up recycle or nurture plays within the system. So one of the things that it's useful for is picking up everyone who's in a sequence who has or hasn't engaged yet. If you wanted to modify who's in your sequence or perhaps pull them out to treat them differently. Um, so you can look for things like people who haven't opened, people who haven't replied, those kind of triggers with the activity filters. The other one that's useful is for everyone who's done sequences, who's not going to show up in your active sequence filter. You can just look for everyone who's been sent an email before or sent X number of emails before, who has been sent emails but hasn't replied, who has been sent emails but has opened, who has clicked. All of those filters are available. So it's really easy to go back and say, hey, those people were on ICP. They are potentially valuable leads. It probably just wasn't the right time last time. Let's pull that list again without having to rethink it all, just by targeting past activity. And then let's start working that list again with a new set of sequences.
Man, this was back when I was building Carb, this was the hardest thing to get users to understand and think about. Like I remember one of our engineers, I think it was Preston, our CTO, maybe it was Francesco, asked me like, what happens to the list once the sequence finishes? And I was like, I don't know. And I didn't have a good answer. Eventually we did build kind of like a version of this Apollo UI, but we didn't have all of the data in there back in the day. But once you've run through a sequence, like you put so much effort into designing a sequence, into designing the filters, into picking the list, into getting just the right people on there. And then you go and run, and like maybe your messaging was good, maybe your timing was good, maybe it wasn't, right? Now that list is just dead, right? Like you're not going to do anything with that list or those contacts. You might scoop them up into another campaign. But I love that you can have a method of pushing them into another campaign or automating this. So talk to me a little bit about how you've used that in the past.
Yeah, definitely. So, you can do these things by hand as you're building them out, but you can also use them in conjunction with workflows, which used to be called plays, but is now called workflows in the tool.
Mm.
And so that is a great way to automate some of this. So you're not having to remember to go get that list, remember to move it over to the other sequence. You can just set up a workflow that runs, on a trigger as it happens, like event-based, as someone opens, as someone clicks, or you can trigger those on a time basis. So once a day, once a week, so on and so forth. And so that's helpful in a few ways. Like one, when someone finishes a sequence, you can grab them, stick them in a list, and then you can go and you can pull 10 people from that list every day and stick them into your re-engagement sequence. And what that gives you the ability to do is also manage overwhelm for your sales team. You don't want to pile 10,000 contacts in at once and have those all flow back in. And so you can, really take control by using lists and sequences together to slowly move people in between different things. One of the newest things that I haven't used yet that I did see is you can actually pause now just in a workflow. So you don't even need that extra step I was doing of the list building and then another play to go get them. You can actually just use a workflow now to pause for X number of time and then do the next thing that you want it to do directly. So they're always making it easier and easier every time I look inside.
It's interesting. About 6 months ago, I had a conversation with, I think it was Matthew Roberts. And we were talking about how he is continually working a small market in the things that they go into. And he had all of these different signals. And we were doing a bunch of them kind of in Clay. And I think every time I look in Apollo, like one of those signals or filters or things kind of pops up in there. I like Clay as well. We still use it a great deal. It's having the workflows and the filters and stuff in two different places. He's just got to do the download upload dance. So it's just a little bit, harder. It's a little bit less integrated. So I like that we're starting to see these types of filters show up, because I do think one of the most powerful things you can use Apollo for is not as a spam cannon, but as a really targeted laser to use all of these different things that we're talking about and kind of carve out that perfect play for this type of user. All right, you've got your TAM, and then you've got the 32 different plays that you can run. And if you invest and you build those and you save them, and then you add workflow automations like this, like if once somebody matches these new set of 32 criteria that Jay just kind of built in, there might only be one or two people a month but then you could just automatically add them into this new play or workflow, or it's workflows now. It used to be plays, it's now workflows. Got it. I still call GM Place. I know it's Rogers Arena now. This is such a Vancouver reference, but it used to be called GM Place or the Garage, which is arguably much better than Rogers Place, especially when there's already another arena named Rogers. But anyway, I digress. I'm not good with names. You're Jeff, right?
Rogers is AT&T for everyone else listening. So
There you go. Thank you. I think we were talking about kind of activity filters, then we kind of got into workflows. And I might have been leading us a little bit into kind of nurture, but I think before we get to nurture, maybe we could talk about it, kind of finish talking about some of the ways that you've used workflows on the ICP
definitely.
data.
Yeah, they're useful for kind of two parts. One, for how you're flowing things. I know I'm using flow and workflow together, but how you're flowing things across different sequences. Really helpful for automating the process, not having to do those things manually. So things like this sequence finished, at the end of this sequence, do this,
Mm,
or this contact bounced. Hey, trigger a task to go find a new contact at the same account. So very useful for that kind of work.
mhm,
But also, one thing I think is really neat is the search capability being built in. So all the search capabilities you can use manually are also available inside a workflow. And so what that lets you do is actually something like continuously revalidate that they're still on target. Are they still an account fit? Are they still a contact fit for your original criteria, especially for
mhm.
longer running sequences? Or I know we're not jumping to nurture, but for later stages when you're coming back to leads, are they still a fit before you just go add those people into a sequence?
One thing that we had a client a long time ago that they liked doing was to do like mix a soft pass and a hard pass together. So they almost use their sales development team as like air cover, where they would send them like let's just do the soft. I can't remember if it was the soft ask or the hard ask first, but let's just assume it was the soft ask. And they would send them basically like sales development emails, but it was marketing air cover. It was like, hey, I saw this in the space, blah, 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 just kind of giving them exposure. And then they would wait like 3 weeks and then they'd come back with either the same or sometimes a different SDR and then say, hey, notice that you blah, 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 time for a meeting. And they
Mm.
would mix those two and just kind of pass them around. And I think it was like two a quarter that they would do, like one of each per quarter. It was an absolute metric shit ton of work to do. But now, you build those two plays, you just build the little workflows, and then you're passing them through. You probably got to update the messaging once a quarter. So there still is a little bit of work to be done and add that to a workflow. But man, that's really powerful that you could just kind of automate doing those kinds of things and passing them in between the sequences. I hadn't connected those dots before.
Yeah, super helpful.
Interesting. Um, we talked about when we were talking about this last time, we talked a little bit about engagement triggers. Can you tell me about how you use them to make the account feel alive?
Yeah, definitely. So when things are happening in a sequence, it can feel kind of like that's just in the background. As a sales rep, at least that was my experience, going through it. It's if it's all automated, what am I doing? That's just kind of happening and then I'm doing my thing. And so what I've always hunted for myself is like, where are those moments where I can get involved or in reverse where I can engage my sales reps? And so when you have a sequence running, other stuff is happening, not just the sequence, right? And so you can use workflows to grab those events as they happen. It could be things like I already shared one, but simple stuff like the bounce. A bounce happens. Now let's engage the rep to go find another contact. That's an easy one. But you can also look for, hey, they hit a hiring growth threshold at this account. They've now posted a new job. They've opened a new office location. So all like the signals and intent data is right there. And with a workflow, you can say, look for everyone in a sequence and then look for net new people who had one of these signals or triggers occur. And you can use that to fire a task for the rep.
Hmm, that's
But,
cool.
hmm. And a task might sound boring, but really what you're doing with that is you're letting the rep know something interesting happened. Hey, did you know that your account, just broke a new growth threshold or just opened a new location? Might be a good time to reach out. So you're giving them those kind of prompts.
Totally. And I think this is a nice way of balancing like automation I think there's so many companies out there that are like, I use AI SDR, and it's basically like, free meetings because I give some company a couple grand a month and a few like meetings show up in my calendar. But what you don't realize is when you're subjecting your market to an AI SDR, it's reaching out to a lot of folks to get those couple meetings. And it's probably good. It's probably, average SDR messaging, but we're not in this for average, right? Like the reason to involve a human in the process is not to just add and write average messaging and have these folks that are just kind of mini, Marketos that are just clicking around doing the same thing that a Marketo could do. It's to use the power of automation and these filters and signals to bring the SDR to that like critical point where their attention is needed. And I love the triggering a manual task seems like such a mundane piece to like the end of this beautiful process of like, look at all the work that we did to get here. And like, because we've triggered this, you're, X percentage more likely to get an engagement off of this. It's really, I love that you're using the automation, you're using all of the data, you're using all these plays and signals and filters to bring the attention of an SDR to like that right critical moment. And not every moment is going to be perfect. Like you can't engineer the absolute, like, oh, if you email them right now, you'll get a meeting guaranteed. It's all kind of stacking percentages on top of each other. I just think that's a underrated. Manual tasks are extremely underrated in Apollo.
Yeah. It helps in little subtle ways too. Like it's going to beef up the rep's confidence a little bit, possibly. It's going to give me a little more context for why I'm reaching out. So when I'm talking with them, I have a little bit more to work with. It's also going to let me break the pattern. Like a lot of this is just not looking like everyone else, not being on that perfectly sequenced repetition of emails. It's like coming in off script, coming in off sequence. Does stand out. It looks a little bit more human, and it's more likely to get a little bit of attention.
Mm-hmm. I mean, isn't that what we're trying to do here? Right? Like we're trying to find alpha compared to our competitors. When all of our competitors have access to Apollo, the person that gets the better result out of the tool is going to be the person that knows how to use it better and can find these little moments, these little plays, these little triggers to do, you know, it a little bit better than your competitors. Don't you want to beat them? Don't you want to crush them as opposed to just do the same that everybody else is doing?
Yeah. A few extra hours of time up front on this stuff when you're going to use it for, I don't know, 300 hours after, it's going to make a big deal and it's going to give you a lot of leverage on those 300 hours.
It's almost like investing in like your employee happiness, because you can invest a lot of your brain in finding these plays and you'll make their job a lot easier. And yes, there will be a revenue outcome for you, but I can tell you as somebody who's made thousands upon thousands of cold calls, there's nothing worse than calling a crappy list where 1 in 14 people you call are going to be dead. Like maybe people aren't calling those lists quite anymore, but back when I was a kid making my dials, I wasn't using a rotary, but I did have to dial by hand and I did have a phone book, and it was the BC Book of Businesses with the names of the owners. And I would go through and cross them off and take pictures of the funny names. That frequently happened. And I think all of these signals, these filters, all this to get the SDR right to that, like make their job easier, to make it more effective. So they know when they sit down for a call block that they're way more likely to be calling into people that A, want to hear them, and B, they're going to connect with. And I think that's just an amazing thing that you can do with any tool.
Yeah, and the one little nuance that took me a minute to know I had to use is there's people who you've saved in a search. There's all from the search, and then there's net new from the search.
Mm.
Definitely use net new for your workflow so that you don't just flood your reps with a whole bunch of historical people who match the criteria. Making sure you hit that net new option is crucial.
Mm-hmm. I want to ask about intent. We talked earlier about searching inside of a play. Can you talk to me a little bit about how that works here?
Yeah, so that kind of like the ability to have a delay or a pause inside a workflow now. So I don't have to have workflow one list, workflow two to do that. I can just still have my one workflow. There's also the ability for me to search if someone's in a workflow. So Again, just reducing steps. It used to feel like a pretty detailed exercise where you had to have all these lists, like all these accounting tables of everything that you were doing, and then reference the right list as you were going. Now it's just all in the workflow. So I can say this workflow, check to make sure they're not in any other workflows first, so that I know I'm not duplicating any efforts. Then go ahead, wait 4 days, then do this thing. Or you can just always have that check in at the end, like before you go do set to put this person in a sequence or push a task out to a rep to let them know something's happened. Just make sure you're not overly pushing too many messages by checking all your other workflows first, which is a pretty cool option.
Mm-hmm. As you were saying that, I'm like, I remember we had outreach and setting up outreach. We had Jordan, our Salesforce admin, outreach admin, like doing all this stuff to cross-check to make sure that SDRs and account strategists weren't putting duplicate contacts into duplicate sequences and doing all this sorting and filtering and like all this logic. It's just another one of those things that's like an added benefit of having the data and the sequencer combined.
Yep. Yeah, definitely.
I want to get into maybe kind of double clicking on kind of some of the like pulling people out of workflows, putting people into workflows kind of side of things. Where should we start there?
I typically set up two kinds of workflows for those cases. And maybe this is overkill, so maybe it's just me, but I use event-based ones and I use time-based ones just to make sure I have everything covered. And so
what is an event-based one? What is a time-based one?
So in this case, when events are things like added to a sequence, finish a sequence, open clicked. So for this type of keeping my sequences clean, I'm using event-based for when I add someone, just to get a double check. Apollo, I know some of this happens automatically, but I just like knowing that it's there. And so when add to sequence, make sure this is a verified email, especially if I've used an external verifier and I've loaded a custom field in with that. Check both of those just to make sure it's verified. Make sure this person hasn't bounced in any of my sequences so far. Make sure this person hasn't unsubscribed. Just lets me run all those checks again and really be clear that I'm making sure those things are checked off.
Mm.
Then I do a second thing. I repeat all those same workflows and I run them nightly. And so I use the time-based trigger, replicate the exact same search criteria to check for all those problems. And then every night, in the middle of the night when I'm sleeping, it runs for me and it just makes sure my lists are nice and clean. They don't have any of those problems.
I prefer to imagine you waking up at like 1 a.m. and be like, I got to run my workflow. Clicking the button. You just got your laptop.
Yep.
Handy.
Reach over and hit. Yeah.
Yeah. Push the button. That's great. Because, it's never good to run into emailing somebody who's bounced before. I know Apollo is, I don't know, the software I'm assuming does it, but you never know. And so being able to like just be doubly sure of all these things and then have it run nightly, that's really handy.
Yeah, just lets you know it's clean. The other thing I do there that I mentioned earlier, I think, was every day or every week, we check the ICP filters. So again, you can just be sure that those people haven't changed jobs, so they don't have a different title now. They're not the wrong person, or the company hasn't changed somehow. Usually more important at the person level, but you can revalidate all those filters using the same type of workflow.
Oh, that's really handy because Apollo does have the and I think it's one of those things they're subtly really good at. It's a really hard problem, which is when somebody changes a job, updating the job title. That is really handy that you can use that as a flag and automatically pull somebody out if they change company per se. Yeah. Go ahead.
And then enrichment tool that's built in definitely does some of those things. What I find that extra helpful about the workflows is I can control what happens next. And so title no longer matches, message rep, ask rep to, jump in. Hey, we want you involved here. Use your best judgment to research the account, find another person, add them to the sequence for plays like that. So you can engage your team a little more directly by using the workflow.
That's really cool. Yeah. Contact out of sequence, or contact is likely to bounce. Let's pull them out. Or contact is likely to be no longer relevant. Let's pull them out. Is a really fantastic way to keep your reply rates high because you're not emailing people that it's not relevant to, or emailing people that have gone to another company and they're likely to bounce.
Yeah. And like sometimes reps might prefer the contacts are added automatically. That's an option, like the replacement
Mhm.
contacts, but it also gives you that ability to engage the rep and let them play a role.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's different variations of like how I would use that, in a low value sequence, where you're going after like a bottoms up approach, like absolutely automate the hell out of it. But if you're going after executives, you know, I'm not automating anything. And so I think being able to have those tools and to know when and where to use them, fantastic.
Yep. There's another trigger there too that Apollo has that's super interesting. So they have a built-in website tracker, which correlates IP addresses to companies and lets you pick off the companies that are visiting your websites that it can identify. And so that can be used to, again, send a signal to a rep that someone in a sequence is looking at the website, which is very powerful for both sides, but also can be used to identify net new leads. So, hey, let's look at all the companies that have visited the website that are not already in the sequence that do meet our minimum account based criteria for being an ICP. And now let's either A, automatically identify a contact to start messaging or trigger a message to the reps to go do some research and find someone they're interested in.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, very cool. And all in one tool. Like there's definitely a bunch of ways to do that. There's other tools out there, but it's nice when it's all built in and it just works and the data's already synced up.
Hmm. And like even for like I'm thinking of like prioritizing contacts for like my hot list. I always like to have a hot list of folks that I'm going to call or an SDR of mine is going to call. And I like to have this as a um, like a call only, either like a call only sequence. So I've done it in a number of ways, like either a call only sequence or like a live list that is like the top 100 people I should call right now. So that anytime I've got time in between something, there's always, you're bouncing from like, okay, I've got a prospect call here, I've got a call block there, I've got these things to do, then I've got this training, I've got 15 minutes, what should I do? Right. I always like to have that hot list. I'm like, hey, I'm just going to go grind on this for 15, 20 minutes, see if I can get anything out of it. And so to be able to stack all these engagement triggers, like they've replied to an email, they've gone to the website, they've done this, they've done that, like, and they're in, generic ICP or from Play or from X or Y. Like, I think those are really handy to be able to build that like hot engagement list.
Definitely. Yeah, you could do that with a search filter that you save, or you could label the tasks and do a task search. There's lots of ways you could dynamically build that hot list up with these tools.
Guiltily, I've done this manually. That's what I was doing in the past, but I think next time I'm gonna be doing this with like a bunch of these little activity triggers or engagement triggers. That's really neat.
Definitely.
One of the hardest things, I think, and we've kind of hinted at this earlier, we talked a little bit about it, but I think after somebody has gone through like an initial sequence, or after you've gone through a sales conversation with somebody, to try and stay in touch with them. Maybe a prospect replied to you and they're like, yeah, this is interesting, but we're not ready yet. That's the hardest conversation to keep track of because it's high enough value to warrant a next step, but it is it just barely crosses that bar. And there's going to be a very large number of them. And so I always found this is where, as an SDR, I would always struggle to stay on top of these ones. I love that you can use some of the things that we've talked about to push them into nurture plays. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about, maybe we start with like, what have you set up with James on our team? James is our account exec. For those of you who don't know him, haven't met him, don't work in PR. Tell me what you set up with James around nurtures, and then we could talk about what else we've missed.
Yeah, definitely. So we have a variety of ways that we can meet new leads. They can come inbound to us in some way. We can be going outbound to these people. And then once that first phase of attempting to make contact is done, the question, as Colin's saying, is then what? And so what these workflows allow you to do is catch people as they finish sequences. So as contact finishes, outbound sequence one, then do this thing with them. And so just because workflows was just upgraded, I'm going to have a little bit of the old way and the new way mixed in here. So new way from what I can see, I can now just one step this, where when someone finishes a sequence, I want to put them on pause for a bit because I don't want to just keep hammering them. They've just finished the sequence. We didn't go anywhere that time. So let's pause 90 days, make it simple, right? You can pick your own parameters there. Then at the end of 90 days, let's put that contact back into the top of the messaging if your messaging makes sense for that, and you could do that. Or let's put them into another sequence, which is our re-engagement sequence or our nurture sequence, and then have them run through that. And you can use these workflows to just automate the loop or the cycle of all your leads. So they come in through the top, then they automatically move to nurture, and they can keep moving to different sequences or keep being repeated back through a sequence until you meet someone relevant there.
Hmm. One of the things I always like to do is have and I used to have this built out in Salesforce. I mean, I think some of the filters in drop downs are still there, but I would have nurture automated for the low value ones, and then I would have nurture manual. Is there a way to distinguish between the two?
Yeah. So if I'm understanding that right, within a sequence, we can have manual tasks and we can have automated tasks.
Oh, when I would say nurture automated, it was just like I don't care. These are the low value people that replied to me, replied to
Mm.
an email once, and I want to follow up with them. And then there's nurture manual, and that was we had a good conversation. We got far down the pipe, and they're like, oh, you know what? It's just not the right time for us right now. I imagine there's a way to distinguish that we're distinguishing between those two types of nurtures. And I would love to kind of talk to me about how you're doing that.
Yeah, definitely. Two ways right now. So lead source, we have different treatments depending on how we met them. And so there's some leads that weren't as engaged or came from a place that, sometimes aren't as engaged. And so we'll have an automated way of working those ones again. That's not going to pull time from our more senior sales reps. And then for ones that had certain statuses that they made throughout the conversation that they were having, or that came from one of our warmer hot lists, warmer hot sequences, we're able to grab those people and stick them into different nurture treatments.
Oh, of course, because we have our Salesforce opportunity statuses in Apollo, so there it is. I was like, how did
Yeah.
we connect that? That was the missing link for me.
And it
Go ahead.
doesn't have to all be automated too. So that with manual tasks, we can stick them in a sequence to fire a manual task to say, hey, account executive, we'd like your judgment here.
Mm-hmm. Because that's exactly what I was thinking and hoping for is ideally, for nurture manual, I don't want them to be sent an automated email. I want them to be brought back to my attention, and I want to work that list. That's really fantastic. Yeah.
Manual list. And then also, let's say I'm not sure whether this person is someone they want to work hands-on or not. Also, we have a few sequences where that choice is made. So, hey, this is a lead. We're not sure what treatment to put them in. Rep, we'd like you to weigh in here. Decide which sequence to add this person to.
Cool. I mean, that's super sales nerdy, but I love it.
Yeah.
Very cool.
But,
Where does that present?
right?
Where does that present? Is that a task that James has to go and click, and then he has to just kind of decide, put it here? Is he selecting a status? Talk to me about specifically, because I love the idea, and I'm struggling to imagine where and how it exists in Apollo.
Yep. So it's a task which we can provide a name for to give some context as well as a description. So we just put the steps we want the rep to take inside there. So, hey, this is someone who we'd like you to decide what needs to happen. Take a look at their account history. And at the end of this, add them to one of the following three sequences, the one that you think is best.
And so that's just all written in text. It's not like a decision box in Apollo, because I'm like, that doesn't exist. How do you do this? Clever. Oh man.
Yeah.
That's a really great idea.
And then some of the stuff that happens a lot, you're building custom fields up in the data objects. You can then use those fields directly, but it doesn't need to be overly complicated. You can just ask a question.
Very cool. I feel like I could go on with this particular type of podcast forever, but I'm pretty confident we're getting to a good place where we should call it, and we could come back to I think we absolutely should come back to this in a couple months, because it seems like Apollo is releasing new features all the time, so we can maybe keep coming back to this and stay updated on what are the new things, and what are and how are we using them. I want to end with like, why do all this work? And I know we kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, but what's your perspective? Why are you doing all this extra work?
Great question. Um, I've been in this for longer than I'm going to admit right now. And what I've noticed is things cycle. That saying everyone brings up once in a while of, what's old is new, what's new is old. Um, Definitely true in sales. And so what I'm finding right now is that with all these tools being so readily available, everyone being able to do a lot of these things, we're not sending out anymore because everyone's being able to do them. And so taking that extra bit of time to put in the nuances to make your outreach different, feel different, happen in a different pattern, to different people or to more specific people really makes the difference right now. It's driving much higher reply rates, driving, much higher earlier metrics like open rates as well. And it's just getting the job done a little bit easier.
I love it. Jay, thank you so much for coming on the show. I guess the last thing is to tell the people, a little bit about what you do at PR. And I forgot to mention this. I try and give guests at the end an opportunity to kind of promote a little bit about their company. So tell me a little bit about what you do at Predictable Revenue and the types of companies you like to work with.
Yeah. So we work with a lot of different companies, actually. We help companies to build these things for themselves inside their shops. And so we work through a coaching and consulting program to do that. We'll work with you, help guide what's happening, build the strategy out, troubleshoot problems, help you build the capabilities up inside your organization. The other way that we work with customers is we can do portions of this done for you. And so we have an outsourced service that's able to take on prospecting work and SDR work, list building work, and help put those things together, ultimately getting you into the market with all the tools and tips we've talked about today.
I'd say the only thing I would add is the thing that's been interesting that we've been seeing a little bit more of in the last, I don't know, couple months is with all the additional increased capabilities of Apollo, we were getting more and more people coming asking, hey, I have a team, it's in flight, but I need help looking at my sequences. I don't know what to do here. I need some help. I'm definitely not using all the things, or I've used a bunch of things and, I broke something. Can you help me get it set? Can you help me, not with like the Salesforce admin or Apollo admin kind of stuff, but like the stuff we were talking about today, help me figure out the advanced features so that I can really get my team rocking and rolling.
Definitely.
Love it. Jay, thank you so much for coming on the show. If people are looking to get in touch, whether they want to, ask you a question or hire you as a consultant, what's the best way for them to reach out?
predictablerevenue.com, contact us, come in, let the team know, and I'll be able to get on a call with you quickly. Or you can reach out through LinkedIn if that's easier.
Right on. I'll throw a link to your LinkedIn in the show notes. And thanks again for coming on.
Thanks, everyone.
And thanks to everybody for listening. We'll see you all next week.